I did everything they told me to do. I budgeted every month. I tracked every purchase. I saved aggressively, sometimes 35% of my income. I avoided debt like it was contagious. I read the books, followed the advice, did the right things. And for 3 years, my net worth barely moved. I kept thinking I was missing some discipline, some willpower, some version of myself that was better at this. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was that I was following a set of rules that were never designed to build wealth. They were designed to keep you stable, comfortable, safe. There is a difference between financial safety and financial growth, and nobody tells you that optimizing for one can actively work against the other. So today, I want to walk you through 5 money habits I quit. Habits that felt responsible, that everyone around me was doing, that every basic finance article still recommends. And why dropping them is what actually started moving the needle. This isn't about spending more or taking reckless risks. Every single one of these is a swap. Something you stop doing and something smarter you do instead. And if even 2 or 3 of these land for you today, the compounding effect on your financial position over the next 5 to 10 years will be significant. Let's get into it. For a long time, my entire financial identity was built around how much I could cut, lower the subscriptions, pack lunch, find the cheaper option. And look, that's not useless. But here is the thing nobody talks about. Your savings rate has a hard ceiling. Your income doesn't. If you earn $2,500 a month and save 40% of it, you are saving $1,000. That is the ceiling. You cannot save $1,100 without earning more. But if you focus the same obsessive energy on growing your income, a raise, a skill, a side income stream, a better paying role, and you increase your monthly take-home to $3,500, suddenly even a 30% savings rate puts you at $1,050. You're saving more while spending more. The people I've watched actually build wealth were not the most frugal people I knew. They were the ones who treated income growth as seriously as expense control. Savings rate matters. But it's a floor, not a ceiling. Once you've optimized the obvious waste, stop squeezing and start expanding. This one is going to feel wrong, and that feeling is exactly why it works against so many people. If you have a mortgage, a student loan, or any debt below, let's say 5 or 6% interest, paying it off aggressively ahead of schedule is not the smart financial move. It feels like the smart move. Debt bad, no debt good. But what you're actually doing is locking capital into a guaranteed return of whatever your interest rate is. 3%, 4%, maybe 4.5%. When that same capital invested in a broad index fund has historically returned 8 to 10% annually over long periods. The delta between those two numbers, compounded over 15 to 20 years, is not small. It is life-changing. Now, high-interest debt, credit cards, anything above 8 or 9%, obliterate that. The math flips entirely, but the psychological discomfort of carrying a low-rate mortgage while investing the difference is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you understand how money actually compounds. Your emergency fund is doing less than you think. The standard advice is 3 to 6 months of expenses sitting in a savings account, liquid and accessible. The accessible part is right. Everything else needs updating. A standard savings account in most banks still pays somewhere between 1 and 2.5% interest. Inflation has been running well above that for the better part of 3 years. What that means in practice is that your emergency fund, the money you worked hard to save, the money you feel responsible for having, is losing purchasing power every single month it sits there. The fix is straightforward. Move it to a high-yield savings account or a money market account. Same liquidity, same accessibility, often 4 to 5% interest depending on the current rate environment. You're not taking on risk. You're just not leaving free money on the table out of inertia or because no one told you to check. This is one of those changes you make once in about 20 minutes, and it just quietly works in your favor from that point forward. I spent almost 2 years reading about investing before I actually invested anything. I told myself I was being careful, being responsible, not rushing in blind. What I was actually doing was costing myself 2 years of compound growth, which, if you run the numbers, is brutal. If you invest $5,000 today at an average 8% annual return, in 30 years that is roughly $50,000. If you wait 2 years to invest that same $5,000, you don't lose $800. You lose around $8,500 in final value because of what those early years would have compounded into. There is no version of this where waiting is the financially optimal choice. The market will always feel uncertain. There will always be a reason to wait for more clarity, a better entry point, a calmer moment. That moment doesn't come. Meanwhile, the cost of delay quietly compounds in the wrong direction. You do not need to know everything. You need to know enough to take one simple, diversified first step. A broad global index fund, a pension contribution, an ISA, and then you learn more while you're already in the game. Learning and investing are not sequential. They run in parallel. Diversification is taught as a universal good. Spread your risk. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And in the wealth preservation phase of life, that's largely correct. But in the wealth building phase, when you're 20s, 30s, building from a smaller base with a long time horizon ahead of you, over-diversification is a returns killer that nobody warns you about. When you spread capital across 15 different funds, 3 different asset classes, international bonds, gold, REITs, individual stocks, crypto, and a few thematic ETFs, because they sounded interesting, what you've actually built is complexity that obscures performance and dilutes your upside. The research on this is fairly consistent. Beyond a certain point, adding more positions to a portfolio reduces volatility marginally while significantly reducing the chance of outperforming a simple benchmark. You end up with a portfolio that takes a lot of mental energy to manage, generates a lot of noise to track, and ultimately delivers something very close to the index, except with higher fees and more decision fatigue. For the wealth building phase, simpler is almost always better. A small number of broad, low-cost index funds covering global equities. Add complexity only when your wealth and goals specifically demand it. The goal in this phase is not to be clever. It is to maximize the time your money spends compounding. Here is the thread that connects all 5 of these. Every single habit I just described felt responsible. That's what made them so easy to keep doing and so hard to question. They were the habits of someone who was being careful, sensible, doing the right thing. And they were quietly working against actual wealth accumulation the entire time. The rules you were given about money were mostly written for a different goal: stability, not growth. And there's nothing wrong with stability as an eventual destination. But if you're in your 20s or 30s and you're building, you need a different set of rules for this phase of the journey. Start with whichever one of these felt most uncomfortable. That discomfort is usually where the most important reframe is hiding. And maybe check out this other video so you'll know exactly what to do as soon as your savings account starts to get extra cash. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if this was useful. I put something out 3 times a week, and this is exactly the kind of thing I cover.